Yeah, so we want to talk about inclusive futures, and we're very interested in communities, but obviously that also connects with governance and technical aspects of federation. The communities that we're talking about in particular are people who are active, inactive, and potential users, and they're across 3 case studies. So we have people from academia, from public and private sectors. So just to let you know who we are, so there's myself, Allison Littlejohn. Francisco is going to be sharing this presentation. We have 2 colleagues from Hartree, so Vasil and Nia. Please put your hands up. Also, we're working with Edinburgh Futures Institute at Edinburgh University, Steve Earle and colleagues. So I'm not going to go into why federation is important because we've heard so many presentations about that over the last 2 days, but obviously it's a really critical part of future innovation. But what I want to do is start by highlighting why we are taking the perspective that we take, which is about the social and cultural issues that are related to federation for users, for communities. So this, we feel, is in the background, and what we wanted to do was use methodologies that would foreground things that are sometimes very unseen. And so we think about federation, I think, in a slightly unique way, or maybe not, but we really emphasize the federation of people. I think Poppy mentioned this in the previous talk. So bringing together people from different disciplines, different sectors, they've got different needs. And the thing about that is, so I've mentioned epistemic. Now, those of you who are not in the social sciences might be less familiar with this term. So here's a definition of what we mean by epistemic cultures by Karen Norsetina, who's done some seminal work. And it's things about our practices, our values, how we view the world, and what we bring when we come together. So the project has 3 objectives. At the moment, we're working on objective 2. But in the first objective, we were looking at these cultural challenges, and Francisco carried out the research and interviewed quite a lot of people in this room, I think. And this is what we're going to present today. But the outputs that Francisco is going to present are now going into some speculative workshops that we've been running, thanks to people who came along to the workshops. We had one at UCL a couple of weeks ago. We had one this week at Daresbury, and we've got one on St. Patrick's Day, easy date to remember, March 17th, at Edinburgh Futures Institute. And then the outputs from that will go into a policy roundtable we're going to run in London at UCL on May the 11th in the morning. Please put that in your diaries. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand over to Francisco, who's going to talk in a little bit more detail about the outputs from Objective 1.
Thank you, Allison. Yes, so as Allison said, we are taking a quite different approach to understand this challenge. So the key question here is about those cultural, social, cultural, and epistemic institutional conditions that enable inclusive federation of digital research infrastructures. But also we have other key questions about, okay, so who decides who gets access to the federated URI, who gets to thrive, but also who is excluded in terms of way of reasoning, and ways of what is value or not. But also I'd like to say something about what we mean by inclusive or inclusion here. We're talking about, again, these social, cultural, epistemic conditions that enable the recognition of epistemic culture, but also over time. I think that is super relevant because this infrastructure, people, communities are always changing. So what we have done is trying to understand different users in terms of, for example, there are active users, there are potential users, inactive users, or maybe they want to resist change, So, but what is important about this is to understand their influx, this fluidity behind those users. An active user today may become inactive in the future. a potential user may become active in the future. But under what conditions is that movement exist? So here we have some examples of some active users. That is today, for example, potential users and inactive users. So, for example, in potential users, we have NHS, art and humanities, social sciences, small companies, and inactive users, for example, people working on data, on the councils, local government. But also maybe this is something someone suggested in the first workshop in London about what about teachers, students, are they potential users in the future or not? So we have this kind of map of different users and also thinking about the future and how those users may become something else in that future. For example, we're talking about levels of federation, but what about the level of inclusion? So you can have therefore fully inclusive federated landscape until no inclusion. So there are different scenarios there in the future. So I'm not going to read in detail that, but it's just to have in mind that there are different scenarios there. So we're addressing this problem from a more kind of sociological, cultural approach to understand this. So we're focusing on these material conditions, the knowledge, but also the meaning, what people value, how people respond, how people enact change. So there are different strategies people adopt and enact. But the question there is how we create the condition that we can engage those people and not to create conditions that they are outside the federation. So what we have done so far is scope and review, survey, interviews, and as Allison said, these speculative workshops. But from now, I'm going to focus on some key themes that we have identified from mainly the survey and interviews, because the workshop we're still doing that, so we don't have enough insight from there. The interviews, so now you can see the sample. So we're trying to cover different areas. Academia, like particular digital humanities, people who or user of HPC users, the public sector, NHS, cultural heritage, and councils, and also industry. Just to highlight that, okay, the sample in terms of gender is quite unbalanced there, but it's just to let you know. So the themes, I don't have enough time, so I'm going just to summarize them. We have 6 themes along 2 dimensions. The first dimension is the power dimensions. And within that, we have 3 tensions. The first one is about this idea of centralization or decentralization. The second tension is about invisibility versus visibility. So, for example, in the future, some way of working, communities, expertise may become invisible. So we have to consider those changes and how we recognize different ways of knowing different practices, and how maybe we can make those practices still visible. In the power dimension, the last tension is about privacy and surveillance. The second dimension is epistemic dimension, so it's about empowerment versus disempowerment. This is about people, so it's beyond skills. So we have discussed, for example, about, okay, what is needed in the future for to engage people and to use federation. And there is a key concept there is the federation mindset, right? But that mindset can empower some people, but also disempower other people. So there is a discussion there about what we need beyond skills there and how we can engage people to empower them. Also, there's a tension between uncertainty in terms of ways of communication, in terms of how the infrastructure will change in the future. So we have to navigate different uncertainties in the present, but also in the future. And the last one is about unity versus disunity. Maybe it's too abstract, but we'll have to explain. It's about the context of discovering. When you unify people, when you trying to unify people, practices through certain standards, protocols, that will probably lead to the reduction of the context of the discovery. how knowledge is produced under those conditions. So, for example, if you have more centralization, it's expected you have a less diversity and ways of knowing. So we have those 6 tensions, and we're trying to answer something that is quite difficult to answer. That is, okay, so how do we keep power with the user while making interoperability real? I think we don't have right now an answer. I'm not sure if when I have an answer, but the point there is, or at least we have discussed that there is not an optimal point there. There are many non-optimal points, and we have to deal with that messiness. But to make sure that we provide certain conditions that enable new users to join the federation, but also to consider the challenges and the opportunities of the active users. So I'm gonna just to hand over.
Yeah, so what we've been doing over the past couple of weeks, and we'll do in Edinburgh in March, is we've been using these dimensions and these challenges with Edinburgh Futures Institute to help people be able to devise different scenarios. So different groups of people are asked to devise 4 scenarios with a high power, low power, high diversity in epistemology and low diversity, and then to think about what the challenges and opportunities are for each. What we do know so far is that John and team will have to make choices about the roadmap, and every choice will likely include some people and inadvertently exclude others. So we're hoping to be able to put you in a much clearer position so that you understand a little bit more about how these different challenges and tensions all come together. So that's the next stage, and we know exactly what we need to do, which is have the outputs ready to inform the roadmap. So thanks, everybody.